Questions. Question 1, Dr. Dennis LAM. Thank you, President. It has been reported that the number of mainland visitors to Hong Kong in April this year grew by 13% year-on-year. In response to my question in January last year, the government indicated that it would maintain close liaison with the mainland authorities regarding the extension of operating hours at boundary control points, BCP, during major festive periods. Subsequently, the government also indicated that it would further review whether immigration clearance hours at certain BCPs on weekdays would be extended. On managing passenger flows at land BCPs, will the government inform this council? 1. Given that several large-scale concerts have been held on the same day in recent months, resulting in large crowds of visitors crossing the border via the Lok Ma Chau control point after the events, with a flow of people continuing into small hours, whether the government would continue or consider extending immigration clearance hours at Lok Wu control point until 2 a.m. the following day on days when large-scale concerts take place, and correspondingly extending the service hours of the MTR East Rail Line so as to enhance the travel experience for visitors coming to Hong Kong to attend concerts. 2. Whether it will expeditiously discuss with mainland authorities the extension of immigration clearance hours at the Hun Yuen Wai control point and the Lok Ma Chau Spur Line control point. And 3. Given that passenger flow at the Hun Yuen Wai control point has exceeded its design capacity by more than double on both weekdays and holidays, whether the government has considered introducing long-term measures to manage passenger flow, such as installing additional automated passenger clearance systems, e-channels, so as to increase their numbers to be at a level comparable with that of the mainland counterpart. Secretary for Security. President, with increasing cross-boundary passenger flow between Guangdong and Hong Kong, exchanges at the community level has also intensified. In addition to the popularity of traveling to the mainland during weekends or long holidays among Hong Kong residents, we're also pleased to observe that a sustained increase in the number of mainland visitors to Hong Kong in the first half of this year of around the 23.6 million inbound visitors to Hong Kong. Mainland visitors accounted for over 70%, that is around 17.8 million, representing a year-on-year increase of 10%. Many of these visitors came to Hong Kong to attend international entertainment and sports events. In view of the growing demand for clearance services, the Hong Kong SAR government has been closely monitoring the operation of the BCPs and proactively enhancing the clearance capacity to facilitate the two-way flow of people between Hong Kong and the mainland. In consultation with the Transport and Logistics Bureau and the Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau, a reply to the questions raised by Dr. Dennis LAM is as follows. 1 and 2. To enhance the experience of both residents and visitors attending large-scale concerts, relevant government departments and organizations will discuss the detailed arrangements for each large-scale concert, including assessment and deployment of manpower resources, formulation and implementation of plans for crowd control, information dissemination, traffic diversion and control point arrangements, etc., based on factors such as the number of attendees, the nature, ending times, and ticketing situations of the concerts. Drawing on past operational experience, relevant departments will make advanced planning for large-scale concerts, including pre-assessing the cross-boundary passenger traffic and making corresponding arrangements with a view to effectively managing the passengers departing through land BCPs following large-scale concerts. For example, the Immigration Department will deploy manpower as appropriate to strengthen services based on the estimated passenger traffic. The Transport Department, TD, will coordinate in advance with the MTR Corporation as well as local and cross-boundary public transport operators to increase service frequency based on the projected passenger flow. Additionally, coordination will be undertaken with concert organizers to disseminate cross-boundary traffic information in advance via social media platforms as well as inside the venues on the day of the concerts. Relevant departments will also monitor the real-time situations at various BCPs, make flexible deployment of manpower to operate additional clearance counters and channels, and maintain the liaison with the mainland port authorities through the established port hotlines and real-time notification mechanism to ensure smooth operations of the BCPs. Following the end of large-scale evening concerts, cross-boundary passengers may undergo immigration clearance via the Lo Wu Control Point, Shenzhen Bay Port, Lok Ma Chau Huanggang Port, and Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge Hong Kong Port. For the Lok Ma Chau Huanggang Port, it is observed that most cross-boundary passengers begin arriving approximately 45 minutes after the end of large-scale concerts, with a northbound passenger flow generally dispersed within 1.5 hours. According to recent observations, although cross-boundary passenger flow at resident relevant BCPs has increased following large-scale concerts, operations have remained largely smooth and in order. Overall speaking, the existing services at the BCPs are able to meet the passenger demand. The extension of operating hours of clearance services involves the operation of the ports on both Hong Kong and the mainland sides, and careful consideration has to be given to a host of factors, including actual needs, effective utilization of resources of both places, manpower arrangements, and ancillary transport services. On the basis of the 24-hour passenger clearance services currently provided in the Lok Ma Chau Hong Kong Port and the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge Hong Kong Port, we will continue to closely monitor the demand for passenger clearance services and, having regard to actual needs, liaise with the relevant mainland authorities on extending the operating hours of the passenger clearance services at respective BCPs when necessary. 3. As the first control point adopting the design of direct access to people and vehicles, the Hun Yuen Wai BCP has been well received by the public since the commissioning of passenger clearance services in February 2023. As of June this year, the daily average cross-boundary passenger traffic at the Hon Yuen Wai BCP was about 78,000 passenger trips, and during weekends and holidays, the daily average exceeded 91,000 passenger trips, which was 3 times of its design flow. Relevant departments have been taking various measures, including flexible deployment of manpower, optimization of workflow, and effective use of information technology to enhance the handling capacity and efficiency of the Hon Yuen Wai BCP. In June last year, the Immigration Department converted some of the traditional counters in the passenger arrival hall of the Hon Yuen Wai BCP, thereby increasing the number of e-channels from 14 to 18 and expanding the number of traditional counters from 9 to 12. In response to the continued growth in passenger traffic, the Immigration Department is now carrying out enhancement works at the passenger departure hall of the Hon Yuen Wai BCP. Upon completion, the number of e-channels will be increased from 14 to 18. During the construction period, 4 temporary counters have been set up at the passenger departure hall to minimize the impact of the works. We're also exploring the possibility of further increasing the number of e-channels and traditional counters. Lastly, I appeal to both visitors and residents to pay attention to the information released by the government on various channels and platforms. They are suggested to check in advance the relevant websites, mobile applications, and mini-programs of the Immigration Department and the Transport Department, as well as those of the Shenzhen and Zhuhai authorities, so as to understand the clearance situations at various BCPs and to avoid making their journeys during peak hours to save waiting time. We will also work with relevant departments to explore further enhancements to the online dissemination of information of BCPs, with a view to facilitating early journey planning by the public. Thank you, President. Dr. Dennis LAM. Thank you. The administration said that after commissioning of the new Huanggang port, they will adopt this collaboration inspection joint clearance model so that the clearance time can be shortened from 30 minutes to 5 minutes. At the same time, the administration said that they have been talking to the mainland authorities to, at the Sha Tau Kok and Liantang port, adopt this new mode of clearance. I wonder if the administration will, at Luowu and Futian BCP, adopt this collaborative inspection joint clearance model. By this, we can shorten the clearance time substantially. Secretary. Thank you, President. Regarding this co-location arrangement or collaborative inspection joint clearance model, these are the directions that we strive for when we develop land sea BCPs. So at Huanggang Port, we're going to adopt the approach of collaborative inspection and joint clearance. At Sha Tau Kok, we're going to redevelop the port there, and we will implement such an approach. For existing control points, we have to look at whether there is enough space to implement such a collaborative inspection and joint clearance model. We're of the view that at Liantang and Hon Yuen Wai Port, we can implement such a model. That's why we have been talking to the mainland authorities to explore the adoption of this approach. As for existing buildings that are smaller in size or scale, there may not be enough space for us to implement the collaborative inspection and joint clearance approach. Mr. Lau Kwok-fun. Thank you, President. The DEAB have been talking to the Secretary for Security on how we can extend the service hours of Lok Ma Chau Spur Line, Lowu, boundary control points. The concert economy has been very successful. However, many mainland residents not only come to watch concerts, they sometimes come to Hong Kong after work to enjoy the nightlife here. They sometimes jog at the harbourfront and they watch busking. Canton pop and Canton discos are also very popular among mainland residents. So I wonder if the Secretary will consider extending operating hours of clearance service. Given our short operating hours, it's inconvenient for mainland residents to come to Hong Kong after work. I wonder if the administration can extend the operating hours of BCPs to 2 a.m., for example. For ports that are connected to the MTR, we have to consider many different factors. We have to look at the demand of passenger flow, and we also need to make sure that there is enough manpower. At the same time, the MTR Corporation have to extend also their service hours. At Huanggang Port, we offer 24-hour clearance service. At the day before New Year, we extend the operating hours of Lowu and Shenzhen Bay Port. During Lunar New Year, we've tried to extend the service hours of many ports, but we saw that the demand was not that huge. So we do have to look at the demand to see if we should extend operating hours of ports that are connected to MTR service. Thank you. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, President. I thank Mr. Dennis LAM for the question. He said that there is often large crowds of visitors crossing the border after large-scale concerts. Extending operating hours of customs clearance may be one of the options to solve the problem, but sometimes it may not be feasible. When I talked to visitors, they told us that there is insufficient supply of hostels of mid-price range. That's why sometimes they choose to stay in hotels in Shenzhen as they come to travel in Hong Kong. I think that the Security Bureau should talk to the HYAB and the CSTB to see how we can increase the supply of accommodation. I hope that the administration will try to adopt the DAB suggestion in this area. Secretary, thank you. We note these suggestions. The HYB and the CSTB is looking into this issue. Ms. Chen Yuming. Thank you, President. I am a chairman of the Taku Ling Rural Committee at Hern Yuen Wai, Lowu, and Man Kam To BCPs is under my constituency. I am fully aware of the situation there. With our policy facilitation, while Hern Yuen Wai BCP is very popular and there is often large crowds there. The Rural Committee have been working with the administration on this issue. The problem is that the passenger flow far exceed the design capacity of the boundary control point. I wonder if we can extend the pilot site at Shenzhen BCP to Hern Yuen Wai BCP. by relaxing the inspection requirements on baggages, for example. If we can extend the Shenzhen Bay Port pilot site to Honyun YBCP, then we can shorten the customs clearance time. I hope that the Secretary can talk to the mainland authorities. Secretary, regarding Liantan and Honyun YBCPs, we've been trying to solve the problems there together with the mainland authorities. We have increased the number of e-channels from 14 to 18. At the same time, we are identifying sites available at the port to further increase the number of e-channels in the future. The Immigration Department and the police have deployed extra manpower at the Honyun boundary control point for crowd management to speed up customs clearance procedures. As for clearance for vehicles, on top of deploying extra manpower where necessary, we have colleagues from the Transport Department to divert traffic to smoothen the flow. Mr. Stanley Ng. Thank you, President. As the Secretary said, there's a growing demand for clearance at boundary control point. I know that the administration has been trying to enhance the efficiency of clearance. That's why we must work with the mainland authorities. On the mainland, people can cross their boundary without showing their physical documents. So I wonder how the administration can make use of information technology to enhance the efficiency of customs clearance or immigration clearance. Secretary. Thank you, President. Now, on the application of technology, well, we've actually introduced many different types of new services. Say, for example, we have a contactless e-channel that was commissioned in October 2021, and we also have a automated clearance making use of QR code. We have been also extending the types of travelers that can make use of e-channels. We have lowered the threshold on the age of travelers that can make use of e-channels. Very soon, we will extend the service of e-channels to mainland residents that holds e-passports of the PRC. Currently, we're looking into adopting facial recognition technology to facilitate clearance. We hope to roll out a pilot scheme very soon. Dr. Starry LEE. Thank you, President. I recognize the efforts of the Secretary and the administration in improving the efficiency of clearance. The concert economy has been very successful. We're concerned about the clearance procedures of visitors after large-scale concerts. I think that over the long run, we want to encourage people exchange at the community level, and we want to encourage more visitors to come to Hong Kong to boost our nighttime economy. The administration said that they will roll out facial recognition technology at boundary control points. I wonder where the administration will pilot such technology so that we can shorten the clearance time. Secretary. Thank you, President. On the point about a facial recognition technology at the Shuttlecock checkpoint, we have rolled out a pilot scheme, and it was very successful. At the next stage, at the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge Hong Kong Port, we will also roll out a pilot scheme on such a technology there. We are now improving the system and designing some of the infrastructures and carrying out tests. Hopefully, very soon, we can launch a pilot scheme on it. Mr. Chen Yong. Thank you, President. Thank you, Secretary. I fully agreed with what Dr. Starry Lee said. I recognize the measures adopted by the administration. But it seems that the progress is rather slow. I hope that the administration will adopt the facial recognition technology and the collaborative inspection and joint clearance model as soon as possible. We want to keep our visitors here. I hope that the administration will work more closely with the mainland authorities. Secretary, as I said, at the new boundary control points, we will implement the collaborative inspection and joint clearance model. For existing boundary control points, if conditions allow, we try to implement such a model as far as possible if there is sufficient space. Thank you. Mr. Yu Pak-lan. Thank you, President. 90% of visitor tour groups make use of Hon Yuen Wai boundary control point. There is not enough laybys for coaches at the boundary control point, and the clearance, the operating hours of the clearance end at 10 p.m. That's too early. As mentioned by the Secretary, the daily average cross-boundary passenger traffic already exceeded the design capacity of the boundary control point. I wonder if the administration will create a tour group-friendly boundary control points to facilitate their immigration and departure. Secretary, thank you. At the new KWOK port, we have been working with the mainland authorities on the implementation of collaborative inspection and joint clearance. Thank you.
Question 2, Mr. Chan Siu-hung. President, the National Development and Reform Commission has earlier on emphasized the expansion of application scenarios for low-altitude economic activities in a well-classified and orderly manner, on the premise that risk be stringently controlled and safety be ensured. Promoting the safe and healthy development of the low-altitude economy industries, will the government inform this Council? 1. Given that the establishment of a visible and manageable, fully digitalized low-altitude airspace management system is a key element in managing and controlling the safe and orderly flight of a wide range of high-traffic density and high-frequency aircrafts in the airspace. Whether the government has a timetable for the establishment of this system concerned? If so, of the details, if not, the reasons for that. 2. As there are views pointing out that the data derived from the low-altitude economy has high economic values, and data security will have a direct impact on the efficiency and safety of the use of airspace, whether the government will study the establishment of a data security system to promote standardized management and the safe and efficient use of low-altitude data, as well as to facilitate the transformation of data value. And 3. Whether it will, by drawing reference from the development experience in the mainland and other places around the world, conduct quantitative analysis on the economic benefits brought about by low-altitude infrastructure and the related industries, and formulates a plan for the development of such facilities through a public-private partnership approach so as to attract more infrastructure investments. If so, of the details. If not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Transport and Logistics. President, low-altitude economy, or LAE, is a national strategic emerging industry and an example of developing new quality productive forces. For LAE to fly far, it must first fly steady. Therefore, safety is undoubtedly a prerequisite for LAE development. In consultation with the Innovation, Technology and Industry Bureau, the Development Bureau, and the Civil Aviation Department, the reply to Mr. Chan Siu-hung's question is as follows. 1. Robust low-altitude infrastructure is a critical element in ensuring the safe and orderly operation of low-altitude flying activities. Given Hong Kong's unique urban landscape characterized by dense high-rise buildings and varied terrain, the low-altitude operating environment is particularly challenging. The establishment of digitalized low-altitude infrastructure, particularly the smart low-altitude traffic management system, coupled with the formulation of a comprehensive data policy, is essential to ensuring the safe, efficient, and sustainable development of LAE. Building on the experience gathered from the regulatory sandbox pilot projects, the government will formulate the conceptual model and technical specifications for a smart low-altitude traffic management system. To implement these plans, the government will commence a technical study within this year, drawing on the mainland and international advanced practices to ensure that the technical parameters of low-altitude infrastructure, including the smart low-altitude traffic management system, are compatible with regional and international regulatory standards. 2. The development of LAE will generate significant volumes of data resources, such as flight data collected during unmanned aircraft operations, the secure and efficient utilization of which will directly affect the industry's development potential. In respect of data management and data security of government systems, the relevant bureaus and departments at present must comply with the government IT security policy and guidelines, which require, for example, encrypting data both in transit and at rest, prohibiting the storage of sensitive and personal data on public cloud platforms, and conducting regular security risk assessments and audits, as well as privacy impact assessments for bureaus or departments' information systems. These measures aim to ensure that data are kept secure and reliable and meet all applicable legislative and regulatory requirements, including requirements on privacy protection of personal data. Given the above, and in accordance with the open data policy of the government, data collected by LAE projects can, depending on the circumstances, be made available to the public via the existing digital infrastructures such as the Open Data Portal and the Common Spatial Data Infrastructure Portal, or CSDI, thereby fostering more LAE-related applications and industry development. In fact, a considerable amount of data beneficial to the development of the LAE, for example, maps, aerial photographs, 3D spatial data, building data, traffic data, and weather data, has already been shared with the industry through the aforementioned government data platforms, facilitating various sectors to explore more application scenarios and unlock the full potential of the data. Furthermore, the Development Bureau, the Lands Department, and relevant departments will jointly explore the feasibility of sharing LAE-related data through a unified platform and build a three-dimensional information hub dedicated to low-altitude flying activities as a pilot project to conduct a proof of concept for sharing data collected by unmanned aircraft. This hub will make reference to the data sharing model of the mainland and closely connect with the CSDI developed by the Development Bureau to unify and integrate data from different sources and be equipped with relevant data dashboards to enable thematic information sharing between the government and relevant stakeholders relating to low-altitude flying activities. 3. The development of low-altitude infrastructure is a forward-looking, systematic project. Through government guidance and cross-sector collaboration, it can accelerate industrial upgrading and drive the robust growth of LAE. In addition to the investment of government resources, we believe that private market participation is also an indispensable driving force, particularly in areas such as the construction of takeoff landing sites and the planning of mobile communications network. Drawing reference from the experiences and various models adopted in the mainland and other regions, we will proceed step by step in taking forward the relevant work on the development of LAE infrastructure. Throughout this process, the government will, on the premises of safeguarding aviation and public safety, explore various operational models conducive to the development of LAE to foster long-term economic benefits. At present, The government is testing different low-altitude flying application scenarios, technical and site requirements, and cross-departmental regulatory coordination through the sandbox pilot projects. The aims are to gather data, accumulate experience, and examine the infrastructure, safety standards, and legislative and regulatory framework necessary for LAE developments, thereby providing trial experience and evidence-based foundation for the planning of LAE developments, including the feasible models for the construction of LAE infrastructure. Our vision is that while the government creates a favorable ecosystem through top-level design, standard setting, and institutional innovation, the private sector will drive industrial advancement through technological breakthrough and business model innovation. This public-private collaboration model will pave the way for the sustainable development of LAE in Hong Kong. Thank you, President. Mr. CHAN Siu-hung. President, I fully agree with what the Secretary said. We need to fly steady first before we can fly far. Now, physical and data security are the premises for developing LAE. Now, I have been concerned about the establishment of cross-boundary flight routes and data sharing. Now, the task group has been communicating with the mainland authorities to establish a harmonized airspace control standards in the GBA. Now, in the Hong Kong Park Loop Development Blueprint, the government said we will explore the use of unmanned aircraft to realize cross-boundary logistic transportation. Now, in terms of establishing cross-boundary flight routes, with the government establish a common airspace management system with our GBA counterparts to ensure that we can share the data gathered from flight. Secretary. Thank you, President. I thank Mr. Chan's question. As mentioned by Mr. Chan, we are now speeding up the development of a shared SUA airspace in the GBA. Now, since we are talking about the loop, we are now expediting the cross-boundary transportation in the loop. Now, in 2024 policy address, the Chief Executive proposed using unmanned aircraft to facilitate cross-boundary flow of data and goods. Now, we are working on that with our mainland counterparts. Now, last year, the Deputy Financial Secretary has led various departments, including the TLB, the Security Bureau, and the Immigration Department and the CAD, to meet with the Shenzhen Municipal Government to discuss developments of LAE. During the meeting, various issues including the establishments of cross-boundary flight routes, custom clearance, and also security, as well as other arrangements, how collaboration can be achieved. Now, we will expeditiously promote the establishment of cross-boundary flight routes. Now, companies in the loop are involved in the regulatory sandbox for SUA. Now, the Hong Kong Park will introduce facilitation measures for SUA under the CAD's guidelines. Ms. Elizabeth Kwok. Now, to establish LAE, we need to have a smart, low-altitude traffic management system. Now, the system must be equipped with the capability to detect illegal flying activities. It also has to be aligned and linked with the GBA and the country's airspace management system to ensure data security and safety. So I support establishing a shared platform across the border to share the relevant data. Now, will the government mandate all LAE projects to use the flight data shared on the platform and to mandate sharing of data on the platform for the development of LAE? Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Kwok, for your question. As I've mentioned in the main reply, our vision is to manage low-altitude flight activities in an orderly manner. A cross-departmental platform is important. On one hand, we are concerned about security of data, as mentioned in the main question, and also as mentioned by the Undersecretary for ITI. From the innovation and technology perspective, there must be coordination in safe flight as well. We will gather experience from the regulatory sandbox. In terms of accumulation of experience, as mentioned by Ms. KWOK, we need to establish a series of LAE infrastructure and ancillary facilities. A brain for LAE is also important. Within this year, we will kickstart the study for building LAE infrastructure. We will also formulate technical parameters for regulating low-altitude activities. We will establish a task force for identifying application scenarios for LAE. Our goal is to promote the sustainable and safe development of LAE in Hong Kong. And riding on our advantage, we will establish an airspace management system which can align with international and national standards. Dr. Starry LEE, what question has not been answered? Whether the government would consider mandating all LAE projects to use government's data. Secretary, we will proactively consider all views, including Ms. Elizabeth Kwok's views. Dr. Starry LEE, President, I recognize the government's efforts in promoting low-altitude economy. Since the announcements of that in the policy address, a lot of achievements have been made. We now have a regulatory sandbox. And as many members have said, we attach importance to the integrated developments of LAE in the GPA. I believe that is one of the major development areas in the future. Now, there is the perception that the pilot sites of the regulatory sandbox are very limited. Now, in the near future, can we have pilot sites along the coast of the Victoria Harbour for low-altitude activities? If we can get used to the idea of having drones along the Victoria Harbour, maybe we can expand the projects further. So, for example, can we have pilot sites along the Cyclone area and also the Victoria Harbour? Secretary, I thank Dr. Starry LEE for her questions. When we launched the sandbox last year, 38 projects have been approved. Now, 8 projects are being implemented as we speak. Now, among the 38 projects, they are located in different districts in Hong Kong. We hope that these projects can make adjustments to the different topographical condition in the districts as well as the availability of network to plan feasible flight routes. Whether we can have appropriate test sites along the coast of the Victoria Harbour and in New Territories northeast. In promoting the sandbox, we will communicate with local stakeholders to make sure that they are aware of tests being carried out. Now, the locations suggested by Dr. Starry LEE may have conflicts with existing flight routes or sea routes. So these are challenges that we need to overcome. But we do keep an open mind in trying out new things as long as it is safe and as long as the public is assured. Mr. Dennis LAM, President, according to information, eVTOL electric vertical takeoff and landing aircrafts, the market volume has reached $1.2 billion in 2023, and it will reach 23.4 billion USD in 2030. Now, in 2022, our country's eVTOL market is already 250 billion RMB large. By 2030, it will grow to 6 trillion RMB. Now, in December last year, our panel has discussed the development of LAE. The discussion paper mentioned about some strategies and a blueprint. Will the administration inform this council whether the government will formulate a blueprint or roadmap for developing LAE more rapidly? Secretary. Now, concerning the eVTOL mentioned by the member, with 38 pilot projects having been approved, as well as the amendments we have introduced to the SUA order, we will actively consider application concerning passenger carrying eVTOL and other large-scale unconventional small unmanned aircrafts. We anticipate a lot of potential in this area. Now, the task force on developing low-altitude economy, as led by the Deputy Financial Secretary, offers coordination among bureaus and departments. On top of the sandbox, we have already set up strategies for promoting LAE. That includes formulating a timetable for building LAE infrastructure, cross-boundary airspace management system, as well as public-private partnership platforms. Now, rather than a blueprint, we think that actual progress is more important. So that's the direction we are working towards. Ms. Carmen Khan, thank you. Now, according to the main reply, public-private partnership is a sustainable model to develop LAE. Now, among the 38 pilot projects, there are many examples. For example, some power companies are using SUA to inspect overhead electricity cables, and also the feasibility of beyond visual line of sight flight has been tested. Now, in terms of when it involves beyond visual line of sight flight and cross-boundary flight, the Director of Civil Aviation's approval is required. So what factors will the Director consider? Can you tell us what factors he will consider so that we can prepare for these tests? Secretary, thank you. Now, when we amend the SUA order, we will enhance the mechanism for the civil aviation department to approve beyond visual line of sight flights. Many test projects, including those conducted by power companies, involve this kind of flight activities. Now, in terms of cross-boundary test flight routes, the CAD and the Immigration Departments have been working with their counterparts to explore the feasibility of cross-boundary flight routes. Now, public-private partnership is key. Among the test projects, there are some involving food or goods delivery. But there are also test projects initiated by telecommunication network providers. Data security is important to those projects. That's an area that we need to harness the prowess of the private sector. And also in terms of building, takeoff and landing sites, we hope that the private sector will take the initiative with the government playing a coordinating role. Now, that will require a lot of resources. So the technical study to be commenced this year will set out the technical parameters for these facilities. That will form a base for us to plan these infrastructure. Thank you.
Question 3, Dr. Starry LEE. President, to dovetail with the latest economic trends in corporate needs, the Securities and Futures Commission (SFC) and Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited (Hong Kong EX) are conducting a comprehensive review of the listing regime, including reviewing the listing requirements, improving the vetting process, and optimizing the thresholds for dual listings, so as to further facilitate the emerging sector and overseas enterprises to raise capital in Hong Kong. In this connection, will the government inform this Council 1 whether it will drive Hong Kong EX and SFC to adjust the listing thresholds for companies with weighted voting rights structures and enterprises from the innovation sector, so as to further attract new economy as well as innovation and technology companies, IT companies, to list in Hong Kong. 2, whether it will consider driving Hong Kong EX to enhance the public float and market capitalization requirements for listed companies, so as to facilitate more large-scale and overseas enterprises to list in Hong Kong. 3, whether it knows the strategies of Hong Kong EX to enhance the efficiency and flexibility of the vetting process for listing, as well as to provide stronger support and clearer guidance for overseas quality enterprises in response to the increasing competitive environment of the international capital market. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. President, as an international financial center, Hong Kong has been fostering high-quality development of its capital market through institutional innovation, thereby enhancing its role as a global fundraising hub. In recent years, the government has called on the SFC and the Hong Kong EX to introduce a series of reforms to the listing regime. These include tailored listing mechanisms for new economy enterprises with weighted voting rights structures and technology companies, the establishment of a regulatory framework to facilitate dual primary or secondary listing of overseas listed issuers in Hong Kong, etc. With the implementation of the reforms, the IPO initial public offering market has been notably active this year. In the first half of the year, Hong Kong recorded 42 IPOs, raising over $107 billion in total, about 22% more than the full year total for last year, and ranking first globally in the year to date. The number of listing applications is also increasing rapidly. As of end of June, Hong Kong EX was processing over 200 listing applications, the highest level over the same period since 2021. Riding on the positive momentum in 2025, Hong Kong EX and the SFC are furthering enhancements to the listing regime of Hong Kong so as to boost its vitality and competitiveness. In consultation with the SFC and the Hong Kong EX, my response to the 3 parts of the question is as follows. 1 and 2. To closely follow market developments, the SFC and Hong Kong EX continuously review the listing regime and related requirements with a view to attracting more high-quality enterprises, including overseas and new economy companies, while balancing relevant risks and maintaining investor protection. Hong Kong EX has relaxed the market capitalization requirement for Greater China issuers seeking secondary listing in Hong Kong and removed the relevant condition of being an innovative company. Grandfathered Greater China issuers and non-Greater China issuers with weighted voting right or variable interest entity structures that meet the secondary listing requirements have also been provided with greater flexibility to obtain primary listing status. In September 2024, Hong Kong EX and the SFC lowered the market capitalization threshold at the time of listing for specialist technology companies to enhance the flexibility of the listing framework. In addition, a dedicated technology enterprises channel, TEC, was launched in May this year to provide tailored guidance to specialist technology and biotechnology companies before they submit their applications, thereby providing support to issuers in the process. The issuers may also submit listing applications confidentially because of the unique characteristics of these enterprises. These measures are also applicable to overseas technology companies. Hong Kong EX and the SFC will allocate resources flexibly based on application volumes to ensure efficient processing. Hong Kong EX and the SFC are committed to improving our listing regime to facilitate the listing of more high-quality companies, thereby enhancing the overall competitiveness and vibrancy of Hong Kong as a listing venue. The scope of review will cover multiple aspects of the listing regime. In addition to supporting fundraising, protection of investors' interest and the overall market quality are ensured so as to attract more investors to invest here. This requires in-depth engagement with stakeholders. We are aware that Dr. Lee and 2 other members published a report last week putting forward recommendations to further enhance the listing rules to attract high-quality overseas issuers. The areas in the report, such as reviewing the specific requirements for primary, secondary, and dual primary listing, as well as post-listing continuing obligations, etc., are already covered in the ongoing review by the Hong Kong EX and the SFC. These proposals will be considered in the process. Hong Kong EX will announce enhancement as appropriate and conduct public consultation once they are ready. In addition, Hong Kong EX launched a consultation on proposals to enhance IPO price discovery and open market requirements in December last year, which include a tiered approach to minimum public float requirements at the time of listing based on issuers' market capitalization, and whether issuers should be allowed greater flexibility to maintain a lower public float post-listing. Hong Kong EX is consolidating and reviewing the feedback received, and it will conduct further consultation on specific proposals regarding the ongoing public float requirements. 3. We are committed to attracting companies of various sizes with growth potential from around the world to list and raise funds in Hong Kong. To this end, Hong Kong EX has streamlined the listing requirements for overseas issuers and introduced a set of core holder protection standards applicable to all issuers to facilitate compliance. Hong Kong EX has Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange and Dubai Financial Market onto the list of recognized stock exchanges in 2023 and 24. Hong Kong EX further added the Stock Exchange of Thailand in March this year, bringing the total number of recognized exchanges on the list to 20. Looking ahead, the government, together with the SFC and the Hong Kong EX, will step up external promotion to showcase the latest developments and strength of Hong Kong's financial services sector, including the listing platform. Meanwhile, Hong Kong EX will explore further expansion on the scope of recognized stock exchanges and simplification of the listing process for overseas issuers, while more proactively providing guidance and to facilitate their preparations for listing here. Dr. Starry Lee. First, I thank the work of the Hong Kong national government and the support of the central authorities in terms of volume, transaction volumes, the number of IPOs. We have recorded new highs. However, we have to continuously review the listing rules so that high quality overseas Undersecretary, I thank Ms. Dr. Lee for her questions, and I've also thanked members for their review. There are proposals in relation to, say, for example, relaxing the public float requirements. Well, we have conducted a consultation. Feedback is being consolidated. We will look in Hong Kong. Relevant requirements will have to be updated and reviewed. In addition to 2 rounds of regulatory comments, they will decide on major regulatory concerns. There is an improvement in the vetting process for the Hong Kong EX in 2022. It took 61 working days, business days. It's dropped to 30 business days in 2024. As at the end of June, in the preceding 12 months, it's further dropped to 28 business days. As the economy changes, as the international market changes, we want to help quality companies to be listed in Hong Kong. The government will continue to work with the SFC and the Hong Kong EX to review our listing regime. We would like to ensure that the services and the time frame will meet the needs of these companies. Mr. Robert Lee. In the policy address in 2024, the government made it clear that there would be more channels for sales of private equity funds. In February this year, the SFC has also published a press release on expanding the choices of investors and promoting the development of the market. Will more details be announced, say, for example, the standards for valuation, express channels, tax concessions, mutual market access, improvements of market liquidity, etc., to attract quality companies and funds to come to Hong Kong. I thank the member for the question. Just now, the member talked about a press release. We welcome alternative investments to be listed in Hong Kong. We have announced the requirements. We attach importance to the development of private equity funds or alternative investments in Hong Kong. In this regard, we'll ask the SFC and the Hong Kong EX to provide quality service so that these companies will find it easy to be listed in Hong Kong. In the development of private equity funds in Hong Kong, it's something that we attach importance to. We rank the second in Asia when it comes to the overall volume. That's why we want to further enhance our tax concessions. We're working on a proposal for the ancillary benefits to be enhanced in relation to these private equity funds. We will submit our proposal later. Mr. Lam Sen-keung, in 2022, I received a lot of complaints from companies saying that it's very difficult for them to get listed in Hong Kong. Together with a number of legislators and professional bodies, we have put our heads together to come up with some recommendations. I moved a motion in the LegCo. Thereafter, there was reform in the listing regime. So we have now become one of the top places in Hong Kong. It's said that there is the possibility of China concept stocks being withdrawing from U.S. Markets. If that is the case, will there be professional bodies, especially those in Hong Kong, that will help to assist these China concept stocks to come to Hong Kong through a fast track? Thank you. I thank members for giving us valuable comments on the improvement of our listing regime. Let me give you some information about the China concept stocks. Well, there's always been interest for them to come back to Hong Kong. As at the end of June, the market capitalization of China concept stocks listed in the U.S. exceeded over $1.3 trillion. Over 70% of the market capitalization has, through dual listing and secondary listing, listed in Hong Kong. As the member said, there has been changes in the international landscape. We understand that they may need an expedited track for them to come to be listed in Hong Kong. Upon the instruction of the government, the SFC as well as the Hong Kong EX have been working actively to provide assistance as well as guidance to these companies. The Hong Kong EX also took the initiative to liaise with these companies to sound out their interest in coming back to be listed in Hong Kong. Should there be a need for special treatment, the SFC and the Hong Kong EX will actively consider these circumstances. Mr. Tan Yue-hung, from 1993 there was a listing. There has been a number of development. Hong Kong has developed into an international financial center. However, we have to take into account the number of overseas companies. In London, it's about 40%. In the US, it's about 20%. However, when it comes to Hong Kong, the number of overseas issuers is just about 5% or so. We have family offices and some other companies. So there are specific measures. Will you have any specific measures to increase the number of overseas issuers to say about 10% in our market? I thank the member for the question. Hong Kong is an international financial center. We provide various services for listing in the region. We are a platform for them to raise funds and liaise with different investors. At the same time, we want to attract issuers of different places to be listed in Hong Kong. There has been a number of enhancement measures since 2022, say, for example, more flexibility for dual listing and a core shareholder protection standards. All these measures are put in place. The policy intent of these measures is to attract and facilitate overseas issuers to be listed in Hong Kong. One of the measures is to list various recognized stock exchanges onto our list. In 2023 and 2024, we had the Saudi Exchange, Indonesia Stock Exchange, Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange, as well as the Dubai Financial Market being included. In March this year, we've added the Stock Exchange of Thailand. Enterprises listed in the main market at these places can come to Hong Kong to be listed. In addition, we also try to attract ETFs to come to Hong Kong. In 2023, we have welcomed the first ETF that tracked Saudi market to be listed in Hong Kong. We'll continue with our efforts. In terms of our promotion, the Hong Kong EX has been working in the Middle East as well as ASEAN markets because we have seen we are aware of the potential. We'll continue to work with Invest Hong Kong, our ETOs, to tell good stories of Hong Kong so as to attract more companies to come to Hong Kong to raise funds.
Question for Mr. Paul TSE. President, it's been reported that 300 enterprises in Hong Kong have ceased operation over the first half of this year. A number of enterprises are facing cash flow difficulties and some are having their loan called in by the bank. Many members of the business sector are worried that once unable to reverse the fiscal deficit, the government will raise taxes significantly. Some academics have projected that the government may need to raise the salaries tax rate to 26.5% before fiscal balance can be achieved. Against the backdrop of uncertain economic prospects, instability in work income and substantial increase in living and tax expenses, the public's investment confidence and desire for consumption have been suppressed. In this connection, will the government inform this council? 1. Whether it has examined if there are signs that the government's fiscal deficit has narrowed since the release of this year's budget, and if there is room to reduce bond issuance volumes in the future. 2. In the light of the aforesaid worries of the business sector and members of the public about the economy and tax hikes, what policies or measures are put in place by the authorities to stabilize the confidence of various sectors, whether it can commit to not raising taxes? And 3. As it's been reported that a certain major property developer and a number of small and medium-sized developers in Hong Kong are facing operational crisis, with some even defaulting on debts and being on the verge of closure, and foreign media have been described a certain major developer as too big to fail, so much so that in the event of a closure, it stands to pose a serious crisis to local banks. Whether the government has assessed the negative impact on the banking system, economic structure, unemployment rate, public confidence in investment, consumer sentiment, and even government revenue in the event of successive closures of developers, and whether it has formulated countermeasures? Thank you. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. President, regarding the questions raised by Mr. Paul TSE, I will first give a brief account of the latest developments of Hong Kong's overall economic situation and the government's public finance strategies. The Hong Kong economy grew solidly. Real GDP rose by 2.5% in the full year of 2024, and the year-on-year increase in the first quarter of 2025 is 3.1%, which is higher than the 1.5% average growth of G7 countries in the first quarter of 2025. As regards the stock market, the Hang Seng Index surged by a cumulative 20% in the first half of the year. Our stock market trading as well as initial public offering was active. The average daily turnover for the first half of the year was around $240 billion, an increase of 118% when compared with the same period last year. More than $107 billion was raised in the first half of the year, an increase of about 7 times when compared with the same period last year, ranking first globally.
Nevertheless, certain sectors such as traditional retail and catering are still facing greater challenges due to changing consumption patterns of visitors and residents. On public finances, the 2025-26 budget outlined a reinforced fiscal consolidation program, focusing mainly on expenditure control supplemented by revenue generation to gradually restore balance to government accounts. According to the medium-range forecast, the government's operating account will largely achieve balance in 2025-26 and return to a surplus starting from 2026-27. The capital account is estimated to record a deficit in the MRF period due to the accelerated development of the Northern Metropolis and other capital works projects relating to the economy and people's livelihood. But the level of deficit will decline year on from 2026-27 onwards. After taking account of net proceeds from the issuance of bonds, the consolidated accounts will return to a surplus starting from 2028-29. The questions raised by Mr. Paul TSE cover a wide range of issues. We've prepared a reply in consultation with the relevant bureau and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. A consolidated deficit of $67 billion is expected for this financial year due to the fact that some major types of revenue, including salaries and profits taxes, are mostly received towards the end of the financial year. It's premature at this juncture to project our full year financial results. However, the increase in trading volume of the stock market in the first half of the year has led to an increase in stamp duty revenue, rendering support to our public finances. Regarding the size of bond issuance, we've planned to issue a total of $150 billion to $195 billion worth of bonds per annum. Under the government's sustainable bond program and the infrastructure bond program in the next 5 years, the size of bond issuance for the current financial year is estimated to be $150 billion. We have no intention to change this target at the present stage. Economic and tax policy. The government has all along been adopting a multi-pronged approach to assist enterprises in meeting the challenges of economic restructuring to reinforce their confidence in pursuing business development. As regards cash flow pressure, the government helps SMEs obtain commercial loans by providing loan guarantees through the SME Financing Guarantee Scheme. Also, in the light of market and technological development trends, the government supports enterprises, particularly SMEs, through the BUD Fund, including its e-commerce Easy, the Export Marketing and Trade and Industrial Organization Support Fund, in upgrading and transformation, as well as tapping into the mainland and overseas markets. I must emphasize that the government did not raise taxes substantially in the past few years, and we have no plan to raise taxes substantially at present. The reinforced fiscal consolidation program outlined in this year's budget focuses primarily on expenditure control to be supplemented by revenue generation. On identifying new revenue sources, our principles are to maintain the competitiveness of Hong Kong's simple and low tax regime by avoiding considerable increase in tax rates or introduction of new taxes, and to uphold the user pays and affordable users pay principles as far as practicable, whilst increasing revenue. The simple and low tax policy that Hong Kong has all along been pursuing is one of Hong Kong's core competitiveness. In the latest World Competitiveness Yearbook 2025, published by the International Institute for Management Development, Hong Kong's competitiveness ranks third globally, in which Hong Kong tops the ranking in tax policy. Meanwhile, the government continues to make strategic use of tax measures in different areas to promote the development of our industries and economic diversification, as well as to enhance Hong Kong's business environment and competitiveness. As announced in this year's budget, we'll provide half-rate tax concession for eligible commodity traders to drive the development of maritime services. It's our plan to formulate proposals on the preferential tax regimes for funds, single-family offices, and carried interest this year to foster the development of the asset and wealth management industries. Property-related loans' impact on banking system. The HKMA has been closely monitoring the healthy development of Hong Kong's banking sector. The total capital ratio of locally incorporated banks and the average liquidity coverage ratio of the major banks were 24.2% and 182.5% respectively as at end of March this year, well above international standards. Overall, the credit risk associated with local property development and investment loans is manageable. A significant portion of the Hong Kong bank's exposures relating to local property development and investment loans are to the large players with relatively good financial health. For exposures to mid and smaller-sized local property developers and investors, including some with weaker financials or higher gearing, banks have already taken credit risk mitigating measures early on, and most of these loans are secured. Besides, there is no concentration of risks at individual borrower level. The overall asset quality of the banking system is manageable and provisions remain sufficient. The provision coverage ratio, that is the total of general and specific provisions as a percentage of non-performing loans, stand at around 60% as at the end of March this year. If taking into account and deducting the market value of collateral from the non-performing loans, the adjusted provision coverage ratio would be about 145%. The HKMA will strive to maintain a sound banking system by continuing to keep a close watch on the global economic and trade conditions, as well as the development of and risk changes in the real estate market, and maintaining close communication with the banking sector. Thank you. Mr. Paul TSE. President, indeed, we see a rebound of our stock market. But compared to the 33,000 points we saw at the peak, we're still very far away from that. And compared to the US and Japan, we're not doing very well. Let's look at some statistics. Let's look at the number of negative equity cases we have. We have about 471 cases. That's the record high in since 2023. And we have a 12% vacancy rate in terms of property, and our bankruptcy cases registered 949 cases. Not to mention that there are many empty stores on the streets with closures of cinemas and eateries. There's recently a survey showing that 50% of our consumers expect that they will see a drop in their pay, and 24% of the respondents said they will not be able to repay their debts, and 39% said they will lower their expenditure in terms of consumption. Are we living in a parallel universe? How come what the public is feeling is very different from that of the government? I'm not sure if the Secretary can answer this question, but will the government make advanced preparation to boost consumers' confidence? Will the government undertake not to raise taxes within the current term? Secretary. I thank the member for the follow-up questions. First, I'd like to clarify that the statistics I provided were solid figures. As mentioned, in 2024, we saw an increase of real GDP of 2.5%, and this year it's 3.1% in the first quarter. And this is higher than the 1.5% average growth of G7 countries in the first quarter of this year. These are solid economic figures. Indeed, for traditional retail and catering sectors, with the changing consumption patterns of visitors and with a changing economic situation, these sectors are facing greater challenges. So there is difference or discrepancy between what the public can feel as well as the solid figures that I provided. We have different schemes in place to offer support to SMEs to help them achieve transformation and upgrading. As to the question about taxes, indeed, the FSTB over the past few years have not raised taxes substantially, and we have no plan to raise taxes significantly at present. If you look at our operating account this year, we see a balance, and we expect that in the next fiscal year there will be a surplus in the operating account. We hope the member understands the situation. Dr. Teck Shi-yun. President, the Secretary, in his main reply, mentioned that there is the reinforced fiscal consolidation program. The welfare sector feels the impact because there will be a drop in expenditure for our sector. In year 2025-26, our recurrent expenditure has reached a balance, and the next year we will see a surplus. Well, against this backdrop, will the government consider removing the cut on expenditure on social welfare to benefit more grassroots people? Secretary, I'd like to mention again some of the figures. As mentioned, for the operating account, we achieve a balance for this fiscal year. We expect that in the next fiscal year, there will be a surplus. That's our medium-range forecast. Apart from the operating account, we have the capital account, which includes cost on construction works. So we will see a deficit in the coming few years for the consolidated accounts. That's the overall fiscal position. As regards to the reinforced fiscal consolidation program, we try to contain expenditure growth, and we also make use of the fiscal resources we have, and we try our best to increase revenue. Each policy bureau, when trying to contain expenditure growth, they will look at their policy objective and how they can redeploy resources under their purview. There have been communications between the government and members of this council. I believe that will make the best decision together. Mr. Chen Paul, President, in the first paragraph of the Secretary's major reply, there is mention of some figures. In the insurance sector, over $100 billion of bonds have to be purchased to deal with investment risks. Is there a plan on the government side to issue long-term bonds for example, a tenor of 15 or 20 years to offer more options for the insurance sector? Secretary, I thank the member for the questions. For a long time, the member has represented the insurance sector and reflected the sector's views to us. And we see that the insurance sector has been very interested in Hong Kong dollar denominated bonds and debts. Indeed, this year we issued some Hong Kong dollar bonds and securities, including those with a tenor of 5 years or even 15 years. Moving forward, we will explore issuing more of this kind of medium to long-term bonds to meet the market's needs. This is also to tie in with the long-term infrastructure projects we have. So on one hand, we'll be able to meet the needs of the market, and on the other hand, we'll meet our financing needs. Dr. Lillian KWOK, according to the Secretary's reply, the government has been adopting a simple and low tax regime, and that's been our competitiveness, and we've been ranked the 3rd in the World Competitiveness Yearbook, and in terms of tax policy, we top the ranking. One important element of our tax regime is to encourage enterprises and individuals to earn more. However, there's been progressive rating taxing system in recent years. Some people are worried that they will be taxed more money. Well, the government promised that this will not going to be the trend. Secretary. Thank you, President. I thank the member for the questions. As said in my main reply, over the past few years, we haven't seen any substantial increase of taxes, and at this stage, we have no plan to raise taxes significantly. I'd like to share with members about our experience. We have adjusted our tax system a number of times. For example, we have the 2-tiered salaries tax system, and that only affects 0.6% of the taxpayers. And for the progressive rating system, it only affects 2% of the residential properties. So when we adjust our tax system, we do take into account the affordable users pay principle. At the same time, there are also measures that help alleviate the public's burden. For example, in this year's budget, it's announced that the 100 stamp duty cap for $3 million property is adjusted for those valued at $4 million. So the $100 stamp duty will only be charged on $4 million properties. So we will continue to talk to members of this council. We will listen to members' views. Mr. Michael Teen, President. It is expected that the accounts will achieve a balance soon. Well, we always look at the operating account, and you said that there will be a surplus by 2028-29. I think we have to move faster. We cannot only look at the consolidated accounts. We have to grow the pie. And the major direction is about old and new sectors. We have seen a wave of business closures, and people panic. You said you see a record high in terms of newly registered companies, and we have to rely on them on our profit tax revenue. For financial sector, for those engaged in Web3 and family offices, do you impose any requirements on other secretaries? Do you have KPIs for them so that they will help bring in new companies to Hong Kong? Secretary, true. In order to grow the pie, we have to do it in a cross-sectoral manner. We have different measures concerning different areas. Take, for example, family offices. Earlier on, the chief executive has already given us a KPI. That is, by the end of this year, Invest Hong Kong will have to help no less than 200 family offices to settle in Hong Kong, and we are confident that we are able to achieve the target. And for private equity funds as well as venture capital, as mentioned earlier, we are formulating a tax measure so that we can come up with a preferential tax regimes for carried interest to attract more enterprises to come to Hong Kong. Different policy bureaus, including Invest Hong Kong, will proactively bring in companies. For example, our colleagues from Oasis will work hard to attract companies to come to Hong Kong. Earlier, we implemented the company redomiciliation regime. We got very good feedback from the market. Some multinational corporations and financial companies told us that they will make use of this regime to move their operations to Hong Kong, and we will keep up with our effort in this regard. Professor Kennedy Wong, in the Secretary's major reply, he said that the traditional retail and catering industries are facing greater challenges. Indeed, we're seeing an increase of unemployment rate in these two sectors. My question is, will the government resume the distribution of consumption vouchers to stimulate the growth of these industries? Secretary, I thank the member for the questions. For the SAR government, there are different industries in Hong Kong, and we have different policies for different industries. We, from time to time, review our policy initiatives. As mentioned, we have e-commerce easy, as well as the Bud Fund, as well as other schemes such as the SME Financing Guarantee Scheme. As to whether we will enhance the existing schemes or roll out new initiatives, we will listen to people's views. We welcome members' comments and suggestions as well. I want to stress that as we see an economic restructuring, certain sectors may face certain challenges, and for other sectors, they may be performing better and they may see a faster economic growth. So we have to work with stakeholders from different areas so that we can cater to the needs of different sectors and members of the public, and we can deploy the right measure to help them. Thank you.
Question number 5, Ms. Lillian KWOK. Thank you, President. Integrated education has been implemented in Hong Kong since 1997 to provide comprehensive learning support for students with special educational needs, or SEN students, to help them integrate into mainstream schools. And a 3-tier intervention model is currently adopted by public sector schools to provide support for students with different needs, including SEN students. In this connection, will the government inform this council, 1, of the respective numbers of SEN students currently studying in mainstream secondary schools, primary schools, and kindergartens, with a breakdown by public sector, private, and direct subsidy scheme schools. The number of students currently supported by each tier of the three-tier intervention model in public sector schools, as well as the amount of the learning support grant involved. 2. Of the respective numbers of ASEAN students who dropped out from school, pursued further studies upon graduation, and took up employment upon graduation in the past 3 years. Among them, the respective numbers of ASEAN students from mainstream schools and special schools who were enrolled in Shine Skills Center upon graduation. And 3, whether it will regularly review and update the employment support policies for ASEAN students in mainstream secondary schools, including studying the provision of vocational and professional education and training for them and assisting them in taking qualifications framework recognized programs so as to enable them to better plan for their future career development, if so, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Secretary for Education. President, the government attaches great importance to supporting students with special educational needs or ASEAN students and has continuously provided additional resources for the diversified and comprehensive learning support for them. A dual-track mode is adopted at primary and secondary levels, which is subject to the assessment and recommendations of professionals and with the consent of Parents Education Bureau, will refer students with more severe or multiple disabilities to aided special schools for intensive support services. Other students with SEN will attend ordinary schools to receive integrated education. In the 2024-25 financial year, the government's expenditures on the special education and integrated education are around $3.9 billion and $4.1 billion respectively, a significant increase compared to the previous years. Our reply to the questions raised by Ms. Lillian KWOK is as follows. 1. The Education Bureau has all along been encouraging ordinary schools to implement integrated education with a whole school approach and adopt a three-tier intervention model to support SEN students. Tier 1 support aims for early identification and quality teaching in regular classroom to cater for all students with diverse needs. Tier 2 support arranges additional support for students with persistent learning or adjustment difficulties such as small group learning and after-school remedial programs. Tier 3 support provides individualized, intensive support for students with persistent and severe learning or adjustment difficulties, including individual education plans. In the 2024-25 school year, the number of SEN students enrolled in public sector ordinary schools is 1,870. The detailed breakdown by type of schools is at Annex 1. Under the three-tier intervention model, the tier of support provided for ASEAN students will be adjusted from time to time according to their learning progress and actual circumstances at different development stages. Schools should determine the tier of support required for students, having considered students' needs, and make adjustments with respect to teaching, curriculum, and assessment. According to the report submitted by public sector ordinary schools via the Special Education Management Information System, the number of students requiring Tier 2 and Tier 3 support as at January 2025 were about 62,900 and 4,360, respectively. To help public sector ordinary schools implement integrated education, the Bureau has been providing them with additional manpower and resources on top of the regular subvention. The Bureau provides Learning Support Grant or LSG based on the number of SEN students in school in each year and the unit grant rate for the tier of support they require on the basis of individual calculation. The grant rates are about $16,000 and $64,000 per student per year. Schools can flexibly deploy LSG according to the principle of holistic deployment and pull together resources to provide education services for SEN students. Schools should include a review of the resources used to support SEN students in their annual school reports and upload the information onto the school websites. 2 and 3. The government provides 12 years free primary and secondary education to all children through public sector schools. As regards special schools, so that all students enjoy the right to receive education As for special schools, students generally graduate and leave school after completing secondary 6. However, to help them prepare for life after school, special schools develop specialized curricula such as community training, practical workshops, pre-employment training to cultivate their independent learning skills, develop their potential, and integrate them into society. Schools also assist them in planning and applying for post-school arrangements based on their interests, abilities, and service needs. Based on the data collected by the Bureau for various types of schools, the number of secondary 6 graduates from special schools in the 2021-22 to 23-24 school years has consistently exceeded 500 each year. The number of those taking up open employment, pursuing further studies, and enrolling in Shine Skills Center are provided in Annex 2. As for students receiving integrated education in ordinary schools, with the development of multiple study and progressive pathways in recent years, schools offer a wide range of life planning education and career exploration activities so that all students can choose from the multiple pathways upon completion of their secondary education according to their interests, abilities, and needs, which includes pursuing further studies in post-secondary institutions, receiving VPAT training, taking other courses, pursuing further studies in other regions, or employment. The Bureau continues to strengthen professional training for teachers to help equip them with knowledge and skills to support students and provide information on different industries, multiple pathways, and further studies on the Life Planning Information website for reference by students and teachers and parents. Under the prevailing structure, schools can also offer school-based QF-recognized programs, including VPAT-related programs, to support early career planning of students. SEN students may also apply for relevant high diploma and diploma programs of the Vocational Training Council, or VTC. The VTC will make arrangements according to different needs and effectively enhance their learning skills so as to cater for their needs and enhance the skills to equip them for further employment. According to the information collected by the Bureau from the Public Sector and Direct Subsidy Scheme ordinary secondary schools, the number of Form 6 graduates with SEN in ordinary secondary schools who pursued further studies and took up employment from the 2021, 22, 23, 24 school years has exceeded 3,000 each year. Details are provided in Annex 3. Ms. Lillian KWOK. Thank you, President. I'd like to speak on the main reply. I am surprised by some of the figures, including SEN pupils in kindergarten figures, as well as those studying in ordinary secondary schools who moved on to Shine Skills Center enrollment. Now, I have the following questions. In relation to Shine Skills Centers, I've been told by one of the centers that last year, 30% of the students enrolled came from mainstream secondary schools. When it comes to integrated education, the majority of SEN students in ordinary secondary schools are very capable. Now that you're conducting an IEP, apart from reviewing the 3-tier intervention model, will you consider providing more support for the more abled SEN students so that in the ordinary secondary schools they already receive life and career planning instead of moving on to Shine Skills Centers upon leaving secondary schools, so that we can optimize the use of resources? They need to start planning for their life and their career early. So my question is whether the government has any consideration in this regard. Secretary. President, now in relation to the figure or the number of SEN kindergarten pupils not being provided, the reason is that we don't wish to put labels on these small children at this early age. After a child reaches the age of 6, they may suffer from dyslexia or they may be diagnosed with ADHD, but we don't want to put labels as early as at that age. So for kindergarten pupils, our approach is to identify them as early as possible so as to provide support before conducting formal assessments. As for Shine Skills Centers, they enroll students on the basis of their abilities. In fact, in recent years, there have been more students in special schools being enrolled into the Shine Skill schools. Now, in relation to SEN students receiving education in mainstream schools, likewise, they need to plan for their life and their career ahead so as to find the most suitable progression pathways for them. So for SEN students studying in ordinary secondary schools under integrated education, we provide a holistic support to them all the way through their primary and secondary school stages. We help them start their life planning and career exploration as early as possible so that SEN students will be aware of their aptitude and their potential and that they can give them full play. At the senior secondary level, we want to provide multiple progression pathways for our young people. Now for Shine Skill Centers, they take in SEN students, and there are also SEN students taking up full-day degree courses in other post-secondary institutions. In fact, the DSE results are announced today. Some SEN students have achieved exemplary results. So it shows that under our strategy, we are able to provide suitable support to students with special educational needs on the basis of their actual circumstances. Ms. Rebecca Chan. Thank you. President, the Secretary mentioned support for SEN students under the three-tier intervention model. For Tier 2 and Tier 3 support is provided on the basis of severity of the learning difficulties. Now, I understand that the Secretary has provided figures as per January this year, but do we know more about the trend? Is there a trend for some students to progress from Tier 3 support to Tier 2 or vice versa? Is there an apparent trend you can identify? Is there any deterioration of the situation? Because apart from the LSG, is there any way to provide more support to make sure that schools provide more support in view of the worsening situation? Secretary, President, as I mentioned in the main reply, for the three-tier intervention model, we take a flexible approach and we do have regard to the actual situation of students. Say for a student receiving Tier 2 support, eventually there may be improvement and that this student may progress to just Tier 1 support. At the different development stages, there may be a wider gap in terms of learning abilities, and some students may fall into the Tier 3 category, requiring more intensive support. So we will have regard to the actual circumstances of each student. There are 9 broad categories under the three-tier intervention model. It is very difficult to say arbitrarily the effectiveness of the support provided by schools at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 levels, because each student is different. It's very complex. Support should be adjusted in light of the actual circumstances, with stepped up training efforts for our teachers and additional resources for schools. They now have more tools and the toolbox to support students. As a result, the support efforts have become more effective. In terms of equality of education around the world, we actually rank the second among the countries. So regardless of the background, students' needs are properly looked after in schools. Mr. KWOK. President, I need to declare, first of all, that I am the school principal of an aided school. Now, many SEN students excel themselves with the support of the government under the integrated education approach. I fully appreciate the resources available. As I understand, because of the fiscal deficit, the government earlier announced slashing spending for the operating expenditure of schools, including the cancellation of support for non-Chinese speaking ASEAN students. Now, parents are worried whether the LSG will be scrapped as well, because this will directly impact on support for ASEAN students. Will the government give an undertaking that even in the against the backdrop of a fiscal deficit, the government will not scrap the LSG so that ASEAN students who are underprivileged will not be deprived of their learning opportunities? Secretary. President, I thank Mr. Zhu for the questions. Now, about the cancellation of the grant for support for non-Chinese speaking students with special educational needs, that is not the case. We're keeping this grant. Now, the other concern from the member is about the learning support grant under the three-tier intervention model. Again, we are not doing anything to this LSG at this moment. But of course, in light of the government's fiscal position, we may need to review how resources are optimally used. And for the especially, there is a need to make sure that resources are allocated appropriately by schools to support students with the greatest needs. So just to reiterate that we are not adjusting the grants you mentioned. Mr. Michael Look. President, the government gives a largesse to support integrated education, altogether $8 billion. But according to parents, for the LSG, the government should adopt the money follows the user principle so that parents can opt for tailor-made services for their children. Now, as mentioned by the Secretary, some ASEAN students have achieved excellent results in the DSE exam. So some ASEAN students are as capable as other students, albeit having some difficulties in certain areas. Now we have the three-tier intervention model for primary and secondary students. Will the government consider introducing a similar model to support students in higher education? Because according to what I've heard, some students have failed to secure support after they've progressed to universities and post-secondary education. So will the Secretary consider introducing this model to the tertiary level? Secretary, to answer Mr. Look's question about money following the user's principle for LSG, now, under the framework of integrated education, our goal is to help students integrate into society, and that is why we support their learning and other aspects of life, and we take a whole school approach. The subvention is provided for schools to help students with special needs, and these students may have varying needs. The design of the mechanism is for schools to optimize the use of resources to enhance learning efficiency. Now, that is why we're not adopting the money following the user's principle for LSG, because the LSG is designed to help schools improve the design of curriculum and teaching and learning. Now, for higher education, as I mentioned, things are different. In recent years, the number of ASEAN students progressing to higher education has been on the rise. We encourage universities and tertiary institutions to provide additional resources to help ASEAN students. We also have special allocation for universities to roll out measures and procure equipment to help students with special learning needs, and also to provide training for their staff to promote inclusiveness. Mr. Amenyu. Thank you, President. Full-time students are not eligible for courses offered by the Employment Retraining Board. I understand that there will be a revamp. Will the Education Bureau consider working with the Labor Welfare Bureau as well as the ERB so that the hire and train model can be adopted. Well, I'll take this view on board and back and discuss with the relevant departments. Mr. Dennis Lam. President, I'd like to go to the main reply. According to the main reply, the Education Bureau rolls out policies to help ASEAN students. There is also the integrated education policy. Recently, I attended the 50th anniversary of a school in Kwaichong, and I witnessed for myself the diversity in the school campuses. Now, it's important to build a proper atmosphere in school campuses. In the variety show, the school adopted this song from Chan Siu-hung, that is, if you find your stage, you can shine as well. So for the future direction of education policy, we need to start early. Is there any policy to help students find their own stage so that they can excel as well? Right. President, exactly like what Mr. Dennis LAM said, each student should find their own stage so that they can shine on stage and give their best. This is exactly the philosophy and our belief in special education. About sharing experience and good practices with other schools. As I understand, there are various organizations that provide training for teachers as well as learning groups to promote good practices.
Last question seeking an oral reply, Dr. David LAM. President, it is learned that a continuous glucose monitor CGM is a small sensor that can be inserted under the skin of an arm or the abdomen to continuously measure the blood glucose level. Studies have found that using a CGM helps patients with type 1 diabetes control their conditions and improve their quality of life, as well as reduce the incidence of serious diabetes-related complications. However, there are views pointing out that CGMs need to be replaced every 2 weeks, placing a considerable financial burden on low All diabetic patients require regular monitoring of their blood glucose levels. The traditional monitoring methods involve blood tests and checking of blood glucose levels by home-use blood glucose meters. The continuous glucose monitoring system, CGM, as mentioned in the question raised by Dr. David LAM, which involves sensors inserted under the skin for measurement of blood glucose levels at all times and places, serves as a special monitoring tool for particular patients with clinical needs. The HA currently provides CGMS to individual patients with clinical needs for free in a timely manner as per its guidelines, such as those requiring multiple daily insulin injections and those who need continuous assessments to have their treatment plans adjusted. There are also those who are prone to hypoglycemia and those suffering from hypoglycemia unawareness, including adult and pediatric patients. And for pediatric patients, type 1 and type 2 diabetic patients specifically. By collecting hundreds of glucose readings daily, the CGMSs monitor glucose control parameters for these patients, including time in range, glucose variability, and trend graphs. This assists a healthcare team in devising more customized treatment plans for patients. Additionally, CGMSs can improve glucose control and reduce the occurrence of hypoglycemia in diabetic patients prone to hypoglycemia or those suffering from hypoglycemia unawareness. However, not all diabetic patients have the clinical need for CGMSs. Furthermore, since the CGMSs need to be inserted under the skin and worn for extended periods, some patients may experience discomfort or unease. Skin allergies may also occur. As CGMSs measure glucose levels in interstitial fluid, the readings provided may slightly lag behind actual blood glucose level. There is also a margin of error. On the other hand, while providing appropriate treatment to patients, the hospital authority must ensure that the limited public healthcare resources are utilized in an effective manner. In 2024, there were over 658,000 patients with diabetes receiving care from the HA. On this basis, if CGMSs with a 2-week service lifespan were to be provided to all diabetic patients continuously, it would mean for an overload of blood glucose reading information. It would also mean for an additional expenditure of several $billion per annum. As with the introduction of new drugs and devices, we have to take into account the cost effectiveness and feasibility when determining the scope of use for individual monitoring devices. The HA will continuously review the coverage of relevant services and, under the principle of optimizing utilization of limited resources, evaluate clinical services guidelines, including the use of different suitable methods to monitor the blood glucose level of patients according to their clinical conditions and actual needs to ensure the provision of suitable treatment to all patients with diabetes. Dr. David LAM. Thank you, Secretary, for your reply. In the Secretary's reply, for those aged 15, diabetic patients account for 8.5% of the total number of diabetic patients. So, apart from lifestyle changes, the use of technology will be important in the treatment of patients. We also need to implement that in primary health care on top of specialist care in future. As we are going to move the management of chronic diseases to primary health care, are there any plans of the government to better support those with financial needs to use CGMSs? Thank you, Dr. David LAM, for your question. Diabetes is a common chronic illness. A lot of patients have the condition, but the circumstances can really vary. on a primary healthcare level for those with relatively mild conditions or at the early stage of diabetes. Their drugs are more easily managed, so they can be managed on a primary healthcare level. But for those who require continuous management of blood glucose level, they often suffer a more serious diabetes. They need to be injected with insulin. They have varying blood glucose levels. Sometimes they suffer from hypoglycemia and they receive specialist care at the moment. So if they are to be inserted with CGMSs, they will have to have assessments made by endocrinologists and the specialists. Thank you. Mr. Benson, look, in the main reply, it is said for those receiving care of the hospital authority, diabetic patients have in the numbers of 658,000, and diabetes is indeed a common chronic illness. For CGMSs in Hong Kong, there are different brands available in the market of Hong Kong, but we have received feedback from patients saying that they need $1,000 to $3,000 to purchase such CGMSs. It is a heavy financial burden for those who are in a difficult financial position. But then for those coming from the mainland, it actually only costs only half or 1/3 of the current price in Hong Kong. So does the government have any plans to relax restrictions in the CGMS's guidelines and practice centralized procurement at a lower price in the mainland to provide such equipment to patients? Thank you. Secretary, as I said in the main reply, patients, in accordance with their clinical needs and having been assessed by the specialists, the CGMSs are provided to them for free. For those of low-income households will still be able to receive such treatment. One won't be stopped for receiving care if they're in a difficult financial position. It is also said we have 658,000 diabetic patients, and a big group of them receive subsidies. As for CGMSs manufactured in the mainland, the Department of Health has a system for self-registration of medical devices. One of them comes from the mainland. So, with reference to information given by the manufacturer, specialists may consider whether to make use of such medical device. And the hospital authority will have regard to various factors. For example, whether it is safe to use such medical device, the cost of a medical device, if the medical equipment comes at an affordable price, and if it is safe to use, the hospital authority may consider using this medical device. But we have to understand we have different tax jurisdictions for the mainland and Hong Kong. So we will try to, as much as possible, procure in Hong Kong. And we urge importers to import medical devices of the mainland to have them made available in Hong Kong. Professor Chen Wing-Kwong, I do understand not all diabetic patients need CGMSs. I also understand the government in a tight fiscal position at the moment cannot provide CGMSs to all diabetic patients. But for those who have a low income, who has genuine financial needs to be subsidized with the purchase of such device, will you work with relevant organizations or provide tax incentives so that healthcare enterprises will provide subsidies to patients to use such equipment? Secretary, as I said multiple times, if there are clinical needs, specialists would have already prescribed for the use of CGMSs to patients. These may even be provided to patients for free. So one will not have to pay even if they are in a difficult financial position. But sometimes without clinical needs, people may want to have CGMSs inserted. That is not the situation we would cater for. Let me also say, we have 5,624 patients currently receiving the supply of CGMSs for free. Thank you. Mr. Chan Siu-hung. I have communicated with a type 1 diabetes patient's parents. Often the patients of type 1 diabetes are children, so they need to be inserted with CGMSs for life. For those in a difficult financial position, there is government support, but for those who are barely out of that safety net, they have no other options. The secretary said they would try to have more options introduced, but then the needs of these families are not catered for at the moment. Would you consider providing tax incentives to the families so that they can acquire better medical equipment than those they can afford at the moment? Thank you. Secretary, the onset of type 1 diabetes comes at different times, some earlier, some later. Those requiring CGMS are not just those with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. As for children with type 1 diabetes, indeed there are more of them. And for those who need CGMS, because CGMS have to be inserted into arms, it is actually difficult for children to receive that because sometimes they just don't want that. So we need the assessments of clinical personnel. It is only when it is necessary with reference to clinical condition the CGMSs will be prescribed. And let me also say this, for those who need the device is currently provided for free by the hospital authority. And one does not have to wear this device for life, actually. I want to clarify this, because every 2 weeks the device has to be replaced. It's not just a financial consideration. There is discomfort associated with this. If one has a relatively stable condition, there is not much need for CGMSs. Vast amounts of data are also provided with the use of CGMSs. The relevant person now have to refer to the reports for each CGMS before the equipment is prescribed. We need to make sure there are clinical needs of the patient. Thank you. Reverend Peter Kuhn. I understand many users are afraid of injections, so they don't really measure their blood glucose levels or have CGMSs inserted. the Secretary said for certain groups with clinical needs, elderly persons may also receive the CGMS so that they don't have to have their fingers pinch every day for blood glucose checks. Would that be possible? Secretary, elderly persons do not want to have their fingers pinch indeed, but then for the CGMSs, they have to be inserted under the skin, so there has to be some sort of injection made still. So there's still an injection under the skin rather than just into a blood vessel. So for the elderly persons receiving CGMSs, they need to have the CGMSs inserted under the skin and have that replaced every 2 weeks. Which option is better? I believe the specialists will make appropriate assessments. Many elderly persons, not all of them, but many of them need to receive insulin. But some do not need blood glucose levels measured frequently. So only those who need insulin injections would potentially need CGMSs. Thank you. Mr. Lillian KWOK. In the last paragraph of the reply of the Secretary, it says there are 658,000 patients with diabetes receiving care from the HA, and 5,000 odd of them will receive for free. So that is a significant difference. I also looked up relevant information online. A US brand device would cost over $600. For the same brand in the mainland, it is available for $300 odd. If it is a mainland brand, it will only cost $150. So I think in order to be cost effective, there are many ways of doing that in lowering costs. Of course, you can say the prescription of healthcare personnel is needed, but I would like to say in Australia, for patients requiring CGMSs, heavy subsidies are provided. They can purchase a relevant device at 88 Hong Kong dollars. So can we provide subsidies to diabetic patients to purchase such equipment? If they require long-term monitoring, in the long term, you should be able to save costs as well in doing so. Thank you, Secretary. Your last question was actually many questions. So let me first answer the first part of the question. We do understand equipment is available at a cheaper price in the mainland. With more options available through competition, costs can be lowered. And right now in the hospital authority, the CGMSs cost approximately $600, as you said. But when such devices are used, we actually consider alternatives available elsewhere with reference to other factors, safety, cost, etc. In future, if the cost of such devices is lower with reference to such guidelines, we do have reference to advancement in technology. We will review the guidelines as necessary with reference to technological advancements, as well as the alternative sources of procurement. We can review the guidelines in a timely manner.
好多